In today's latest video on my Animals as Letters of the Alphabet series, we're going to draw a narwhal for the letter N using the iPad and Procreate. Just like all my tutorials, it's in real time, no time lapses or edits. You can follow along every single step of the way, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Right guys, let's go ahead and jump into it. Starting out, I'm using a 4000 by 4000 pixel 300 dpi canvas. It's an RGB canvas. For my brushes today, I'm going to be using my creator set for Procreate. You can pick that up on Gumroad. Links down in the description. We're going to start out using the Brainstorm sketch brush. And for my color palette, once again, I've got this pre-made. So if you want to follow along with the exact same colors that I'm using in today's video, you can get that for free on my website, bjdell.com. Links in the description below. So let's go ahead and jump into it. To begin this, I'm just going to start out using black. So we'll select that. And we're doing N and narwhal. So let's go ahead and get our text in there to use as a guide. So I'm going to come up here to the wrench icon to open my actions menu. I'm going to add text, type in the N, double tap here just to change the font by selecting the font up there and then going to Arial. That's what I've been using for this whole series. So we'll stick with that. Let's hit done here and then grabbing our arrow, we'll go ahead and make this bigger. Just get that kind of position there in the center. Maybe a little bit wider. There we go. All right. Now that we've got that locked in, let's go up to our layers menu and then hitting N to bring open the blend mode menu. And we're going to drop the opacity of this down to about 10%. We want to be able to see it. We just don't want it to be too dark. And then we'll hold down on the text layer and drag it below our layer 1, and this is what we'll use to sketch with. All right, so once again, using that Brainstorm sketch brush, and I'm just going to start out with some basic shapes here. Kind of want the head here, the body will twist up here, and then this will be the tail down here. So I'm just going to start in, actually let's go this side to begin with, and I'm just going to bring in an oval here. We'll hold down to lock it in. And this isn't the exact shape I want. So I'm going to grab the arrow here. And then with freeform selected, I'm just going to drag this down so it touches the bottom here. Then I'm going to select warp to kind of bring out the top a little bit more. So I want it to be a little bit more of kind of like a raindrop or teardrop shape. So we'll just adjust that to our liking, maybe flatten it out just a little bit here at the top. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Now we'll continue on here with another oval, holding down to lock it in. And then over here for the tail, we'll draw another oval, locking down or holding down to lock it in. Down here, I'm going to draw a couple of ovals for the fins on the tail. So we'll get those where those need to be. Over here, we'll go ahead. Actually, let's wait on the fins on the side because I want to kind of adjust some of these shapes first. So I'm going to hold down on my eraser. That's going to select the exact same brush that I'm using to draw with. And then I'm just going to erase some of these overlaps so we can get more of that shape that we're going for. This one I'm going to leave coming out over the top so that kind of creases and folds over. We'll erase this one here in the center. And then this one, we'll kind of bring it down like that. All right, that looks good. I think I want to bring this one down a little bit more. I'm going to erase that and just do this by hand. Just kind of bring that down in a little bit lower there. All right, I think that looks good. Extend this one just a bit, and then I'll do those ovals here for the fins. And actually, now that we're done with the letter here, I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And then with this one selected, I'm going to grab my arrow, and with freeform, I'm just going to drop the size of this just a tad bit and get it centered again. I was just running out of room here on the side and didn't want to hit the edge of the canvas there. All right, now that we've got those, you can go ahead and just kind of fine-tune these shapes by making a little bit more of a curve here where those connect down to a point for the fins. on the tail. And then same thing here. I'm gonna pull in some tapered lines there, and then kind of draw a curved line so these kind of have a fun upward shape to them. Just trying to make sure that they're the right size from left to right, that they match up. Okay, continuing on then, let's go ahead and get the eyes in here. So we'll draw a couple of big ovals here for the eyes. Once again here, just being really loose and sketchy. I don't need to make this perfect because we're going to go back over this and ink it. So this is where you just kind of get the basic forms down, just get the basic layout. You don't have to worry about making everything perfect at this stage. Do a curved line here for the eyebrows. Get those in here, maybe a little bit larger there. Once again, just more than anything else, just kind of getting those set in position. And then we'll draw a V here, holding down to kind of lock it in for that horn. Curved line here for where it connects to the head, and then draw another curved line here for where it kind of folds over and creases in. Okay. Now I want to make him a little bit cuter, so doing a little bit of a bottlenose here, kind of like a dolphin. I know narwhals don't necessarily have those, but I think that'll just kind of add to the cuteness of the character. And then the mouth here, just kind of draw a upside down V on both sides here. Just kind of pull slightly curved line there. So it's not a straight line, but it's not a huge smile either. Curved line here for the chin, and then a little squiggly there, and then maybe a belly curve here. And then we'll add in some extra kind of details as we go around. But there's our basic sketch. So pretty quick, pretty simple, pretty easy. From here then, we're ready to start kind of finalizing this and moving into those inks. So let's do that next. So to begin, I'm going to come up here to my layers menu. I'm going to hit N for blend mode, just like we did with the letter, and I'm going to drop down the opacity of this to about 30%. Once again, we want to see it. We just don't want it to be too dark. And then I'm going to make a new layer on top of layer 1. This will be our inks layer. Then I'm going to switch my brush over. So we'll tap on the brush library here, and we're going to switch to Smooth Inker. Now there's a lot of big curves in this design, so I do want to tap on this, and I want to make sure Streamline's turned on. In your version, it might be turned off, or if you left it on from the last video too, it might be on. So we'll turn that on. Just going to make the lines a lot smoother, kind of alleviate some of that handshake, especially on some of these large swooping lines. Okay, with that done then, let's go ahead and start inking. I think I'm going to move this over so I've got a lot of room here for my hand to come around on the screen. And I think we'll start with this line here, bringing this up and around and back like this. Now, this is where you kind of have to experiment because we've got this huge swooping line. So it might be beneficial to start here and come around, or if your arm naturally moves in the other direction, you might want to start here and come back around. So it's just up to you. I'll try it from here and see how this goes, and then maybe have to do it again. I think that looks pretty good. Now you can see I didn't go exactly with the sketch lines. And I've talked about this to death, I think, in previous videos, but sketch lines are just kind of a guide of where everything is supposed to go. It's not the be all end all. You don't have to make sure that it 100% matches up. I think if you strive too hard to make sure it matches up, your lines start looking a little bit mechanical. But since we also do not have anything else on this layer, we can also grab this arrow again and go to warp if you want to readjust this a little bit closer to your sketch lines. You can do that. It'll still keep that fluid kind of organic flow to it, but you see it matches up just a little bit better. Now, once we add a new line, we won't be able to do that again because it's going to move the whole layer. So we'll move this one and the next line. But if you want to be able to do that every time, you can come up here to layers and we can add a new layer. And now for this one, it also is beneficial because we can start this line further than where we need to. So if we're trying to match this up exactly, your hand is going to shake a little bit. You're going to have a little bit of hesitation there at the beginning of that stroke. So what you can do is start it up here so you're already into that stroke and you feel the pressure that you need by the time that you hit where that line starts. And since we're on a separate layer, we can go ahead and, once again, move this. So we've got that warp again, so we can pull that out. But the other beneficial thing is we can use the eraser and we can erase those overlaps where we started that line at. Since those aren't on the same layer, if they were, we would have to be really careful not to hit that line that we already did. So you can see how that's beneficial using those separate layers. You can also jump back and forth between layers too. So this layer here was that body. We can use that layer if we tap on that, switching back to our brush, and we can use that layer, I'll zoom in here. So if we go over on these lines, this one we've got to be careful because that's obviously, as you saw me draw it, all on the same one. But now we can erase those lines and we don't have to worry about hitting that area that we just did because it's on a separate layer. Pull in some little details there like that. Same thing here then, we can switch back to this layer now, that tail part. We can tap on that layer and then we can come in here on these fins and do the same thing here. Now you can see there, that's what I was talking about with starting the line out further. You can see kind of that hesitation with that line starting, and that's what we're alleviating with using these other layers, using multiple layers to do our inks. And this one, I just want to make sure that that matches up from left to right. They're about the same size, which I think they are, so that's good. All right. Still being on that back layer, then we can also use that layer to do the horn. So if I zoom in here, I can draw the V upside down for the horn, and then using the eraser then, we can go to that head layer here and erase that overlap, and we don't have to worry about hitting that V that we just did. We can also stay on that head layer now to do these lines here, so we don't have to worry. And that actually wasn't too bad. I want a little bit more taper at the end. But now I've got a little bit of an overlap there on the horn, so I can switch back to that layer 4 and erase that little overlap right there, and I don't have to worry about hitting the horn. I'll do that one more time there. All right. Now we'll do some kind of lines here in the center of the horn. So with this one, I might hit this edge too, where that one's at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch these together now. So all my lines are on one layer, and I'm going to make another new layer on top of that. And then I'm just going to come up here and make some curves with these lines. I want these to kind of fall though, so I don't hit these and start a tangent there. So I'll bring these down a little bit different there. I think 3 lines there is pretty good. You don't need to go crazy with it. And you'll notice too with those lines, since they are inside and more of a kind of detail, those are thinner lines than the rest. Okay. Back then to the drawings. Let's go ahead, and this is another tip I'll give you. So we'll pinch these together. So these are all on one. We can make another new layer here. We'll do the eyes. I know a lot of people have kind of a little bit of a problem with the eyes as far as matching them up from left to right. And starting this, I want to talk about the stroke here. So I like to have a thin line here at the beginning of the eye, gets thicker here to where the eyelashes would be and the lids, and then thinner at the bottom again. So it's a light press going into a harder press, back into a lighter press. And this is just something that you just have to get comfortable with. And practice takes a little bit, but you can practice and get better at it. All right, so back to my brush here, erasing that. We'll get the pupil in here, drag and drop our color in there for that, and then get around the eye for the iris here. All right, so now this is where people struggle. You might have a hard time getting the left and the right to match up. So what we're gonna do, since we have this on a separate new layer, we're gonna go ahead and come up here to our layers menu. We're going to slide this to the left, and then we're going to duplicate it. And then I'm going to come back up here to my arrow. I'm going to use freeform. Actually, we can use uniform. It doesn't really matter because we're not going to change the size. And then we're just going to flip horizontal, and then we're just going to drag this over to the right. Hitting the layers will lock it in, and then we can go ahead and pinch those together so they're all on one layer now. Now that those are done, I'll go ahead and come up here to my color palette. I'll select white and add in the little highlights for the eyes. I didn't do this beforehand. I'm going to make the brush bigger here. I didn't do this beforehand because once you flip this, it'll mirror that, and the highlights we want to be on the same side. So if we had flipped this initially with these in here, then the highlights would be over here, which wouldn't make sense with the way that the light's coming in. So we want the highlights to show up on that left side. So wait until you do that wait until you flip it to do those, because you don't want those showing up beforehand. All right, back to the black then. Let's go ahead and we can keep those on a separate layer. Let's go down to layer 3 again here to do this overlap for the bottlenose, and I need to drop my brush size back down. Let's go ahead and bring this around. I'm going to twist my canvas here. I've got a little bit more control of where that ends up. Then I will pull this one down just a little bit, so that goes into the eye there, or into the nose. Same thing here. Just want that to match up there. Okay, looks good. Continuing on then, we'll go ahead and do the mouth here. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of a tapered curve here, then back up here and down and around and back up. And then tapered curve over here. All right, looks good. This part of the mouth, once again, I'm going to zoom in and twist. And this, I know I talked about it in some of the other videos too. I really recommend you zooming in as much as possible with your designs. If it looks good close up, it's going to look really good once you zoom out. And then also that gives you the ability to twist and turn the canvas like I just did. So doing a curve like this, my arm and my shoulder moves much more naturally in this direction. If I'm doing this from the side, I feel like my elbow is kind of in my gut as I'm trying to pull this around. So it's just a lot more natural to have it tilted to the side. And that's something you can experiment with, seeing exactly how your arm moves more comfortably based on the canvas orientation. That's something you'll use even, in traditional art. As you're drawing on a piece of paper, you'll twist and turn that paper. So feel free to do the exact same thing too with digital art. All right, I'm going to go back to the eyes layer now, because I'm going to do this belly part. And if we're on the eyes layer, we can go down here and we can once again overlap that curve, and we don't have to worry about erasing because it's on a separate layer. So we can get that out of the way. Back to my brush here. Let's zoom in and get the eyebrows. You'll see for eyebrows, what I do is I go heavier on the pressure and stroke at the bottom, just because of the weight of the eyebrow and the shadow that's going to be down there, and then lighter up at the top. Then from here too, let's also just go ahead and do in some kind of ovals here, just for a little bit extra details. Do some around there, maybe a couple on the fins. And you'll see, once again, I'm overlapping these. Let's do some here on the back as well. Just varying the sizes of them. I think that looks good. So back to the eraser then, and we can erase those overlaps. Once again, doing those overlaps just gives us kind of smoother lines. We don't have that line start hesitation or the hesitation on the stop where you're trying to not go over the edge, and it just gives you a lot smoother result. Hopefully some of these tricks kind of set in with you. I know as far as the overall technique of using the different layers and using reference clipping masks, so on and so forth, it's kind of the same from video to video, but throwing in just little stuff like this, hopefully it does provide a little bit more value to these videos, and you can kind of have some takeaways that you can use in your own personal art. All right, so there we go. Let's go ahead and pinch these together. So the lines are on one layer, and then I'm going to turn off the sketch layer, and you can see what we're left with. There's our design. Our inks are done. Now it's time to move on to adding in the color flats. So let's start on that. So to begin the color flats, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to the layers menu. I'm going to first tap on layer 3 and set this as reference. So what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to color in on a separate layer using layer 3 as the guide for where the colors go. So we don't have to color everything by hand. So coming under layer 3 then, I'm going to hit plus to make a new layer. We'll go up to our colors palette, use this first kind of bluish color here, and drag and drop this in. Now, I know I've talked about this tons before, but it seems like every time I mention it in a video, somebody new will say, hey, I didn't know that. So I'm going to talk about it every time. So if we drag and drop this color in, a lot of people have this problem to where they'll have a white line here on the edges of their colors and the inks. The reason is the color drop threshold is not turned up high enough. So watch this center part here at the top as I drop this in. You'll see that threshold shows 0% right now. As I slide that to the right, that starts to fill in more. And with this, it's not a huge amount. It jumps up to about 2%. It will start filling it in. Sometimes you'll need this up to the high 90s to fill in. I usually just max it out until it fills in the background. So 98, 99% is pretty good. And that way it's all colored in. You don't have those edges. Continue dragging and dropping these in. And that's going to be our colors for the body. Next up, let's go ahead and switch over here to this light blue. We'll drag and drop that for the belly, and then hit continue filling up here at the top. Instead of dragging and dropping like I previously did, you'll see if you have that selected, you can just tap and fill in the rest of these. Now this is where I would recommend kind of zooming in a little bit closer so you can see, because as we get here, if you hit a line, it's going to look like, okay, it didn't do anything further away, but as we zoom in, you can see it filled in the edges of that line. We don't want that, so we want to get close so we can make sure that we tap on the right area. You can also see too, zooming in, I kind of had a little bit of an overshoot on there where I didn't erase as well as what I should have. I think there was one up here that I saw too. Yeah, right here, there was one. So that's why I also really urge you to zoom in and out as much as possible, because if you stay zoomed out, you're going to miss little stuff like that. And it's going to be harder to erase now that those are all on the same layer. So really use that zoom to your benefit. It's going to make your design look a lot better, and you're going to not miss little details like that. All right, back to this darker blue. We're going to switch back to our layers menu. Always make sure that you switch your layers back. If you make a mistake like that and you've got to kind of do some fine tuning, always make sure you switch back. Now this, you'll see it filled in everything because there's a little bit of a gap right there. So if you have any open areas, it's not that your color drop threshold's turned up too high, it's that you probably have a line that's not connected. So we'll just fill that in. Now switching back to that color, we should be able to drag and drop that in and it'll fill in. So there we go. All right. Now the eyes, they do look colored in, but they're not because the background color is white. So we do need to fill in the eyes with the white. So we'll fill those in. And then we've got this kind of seafoam green color. We can use that for the insides of the eyes or the irises. And then finally, we've got the yellow here for the horn. Continue filling, we'll tap that area in. All right. I'm going to turn the background color back on and pulling out, you can see what we're left with. So there's the color flats. Pretty quick, pretty easy. From here then, we can go ahead and move on to adding the shadows and the highlights. So to do the shadows and the highlights, let's go ahead and come up here to our layers menu. Let's make a new layer. And with this one selected, I'm going to go ahead and set this as clipping mask by tapping on the layer and hitting clipping mask. So what this does is it's going to allow us to color in on this layer 5, and it's only going to show up on the areas that are colored in on layer 4. So if we go outside of the lines, it's not going to show up on that background. With that done then, I'm going to select the purple. And because of the light source here in the eyes, those highlights, I've got the light source coming from this top left-hand corner. So our highlights are going to be on the left side in the top. Our shadows are going to be on the bottom and on the right side. So now that we've got that kind of sorted out, we can go ahead and start. And I'm going to go, let's see, we'll start here. So let's go ahead and start down here. I'm going to pull a shadow here coming up and around kind of into that nose area there. Pull another curve down and around here. Now this is where I'm going to start connecting some of these lines. And I'm also going to come up to my reference layer and turn this off because I want to drag and drop, but I've got that reference turned on. When I do this, it would fill in the entire face again, and I don't want that. Well, I've got that done. I can continue on kind of connecting these lines. And once I have some connected areas, then I can go ahead and just use that drag and drop to fill in the entire area. Shadow here coming down and around. You'll see I'm just kind of using the lines that I've got laid down on the outlines as a guide for how these lines curve, how they connect. And then once I've got an area filled in, as long as these lines connect, it'll fill in that. Now, if it filled in the entire thing, that would just mean basically that I had a gap in those lines. It's not necessarily that your reference is still turned on. It just means that the lines weren't connected. So if you're having that issue, that would probably be the reasoning behind that. Fill this in, line here, and then back around. Now I can drag and drop the color in there. Fix that curve just a little bit. Same thing here with this one. It breaks a little bit right there. You can see it's almost like a slight angle, and I want it to be more of a continuous curve. I'm just going to go back in and do that. And you'll see that's not connected right here. So when I drag and drop that, it fills in everything. So as long as I draw this line here to connect, drag and drop, it's going to fill that in. All right. Go ahead and do a little bit of a tapered line here, or tapered curve. You'll see it tapers right here and gets thin where it meets the eye, and then comes back out, gets thicker, and then back in, and it thins out again. We'll do the same thing over here. Once again, twisting that canvas because my arm is a lot more comfortable making that motion with the canvas set in this direction. Erasing. And then we'll get the horn here. I'm going to do a vertical line there, and then let's grab in some tapered lines here. So once again, thinner there at the start towards the front, and then it gets thicker as the line goes back. And now that I've got a few areas here filled in that are using the different colors, so we've got the colors of the body kind of filled in. Get in here and fix this. We've also got the colors of the eyes and the colors of the horn. We want to make sure that what we do with this shadow looks good across all those colors. So now that we have those done, we can go up here to our layers menu, hit N for blend mode, and drop down the opacity of this just to see what percentage looks good. And I think on this one, probably about between 30-35%, I think looks pretty good there. So we can use that as our percentage. We'll continue here and bringing up and around some of these, connecting those lines and dragging and dropping the color in, and then using the eraser for those overlaps that we came over the edge. Down here, we can do the same thing. You'll see I'm pulling that shadow there on the back side of this line. So once again, using those outlines that we did to kind of help us guide and know where those shadows go and how they curve. Same thing there. Using that line as a guide and dragging and dropping in. Go ahead and pull a shadow here at the bottom of this. We go over the edge, just back to the eraser and erasing. Now, the one thing I do want to bring up here is when you get a big area like this filled in, it almost doesn't look shadowed in just because it's just one solid hue there. You don't have the contrast between the non-shadowed and the shadowed section. So I like to use the eraser here and come in and just kind of pull out. Once again, you see a little part there that I missed again on that. That's why I like to zoom in and just pull out a little bit of a highlight there, rim light there on the side, just because that helps kind of break that up. I'm also going to pull a little bit of one here across the top of that nose, just so that has a little bit more of a fun shadow there coming across. Then I want to get underneath here too. So we'll zoom back in here and get one here coming across that crease. Probably one back here too. A little bit one here underneath this eyebrow. Even under the bottom or on the actual eyebrow itself too. All right, pull them back out. You can see what we're left with. So there's the shadows. Let's go ahead then from here. Actually, let's a little bit more on the iris here. Let's get a little bit of a shadow here on the back side around the pupil there, and the same thing here at the bottom. Just so those have a little bit of a shadow there. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to highlights now. Basically the same thing like we did with the shadows. We're going to come up here to the layers menu, new layer. We're going to tap that clipping mask once again. So you see we've got those two arrows. So they stack on top of each other, but they all point to our color flats layer. So with that done then, back up to our color palette, we'll select white. And once again, that light source coming in from this top left-hand corner. So we're going to go up here to the top left. Again, follow that curve of the lines, drag and drop that in, which I'm not connected there, so see there's something that's open. And I'll use the eraser and just kind of pull that back a little bit. A little bit more of a drastic, sharp curve there. All right, moving over then, we can do the same thing on the side of the face. Come down on the horn here in the front. Zooming in here a little bit tighter. Once again, you see once I zoom in, I can tell, okay, well, I went over the edge there. This line isn't as straight as what I thought it was. So that's why zooming in and out is super, super important. The top of the eyebrow there. Pulling down here, we can do, I like to do some ovals for areas like this. We got a nice round highlight. Holding down to lock it in and then dragging and dropping the bigger one in there. Get to the top edge of this. Erasing any errors like that. And then maybe a little bit here on the top of the mouth as it comes down. Once again here, I don't want that to touch the shadow, so you want to stop before it gets over here. So that's why using, a taper like that, as it kind of thins out at the edge and the end of that line, works really well. All right, I think that's good. Let's go ahead then back up to our layers menu, hit N for blend mode, drop the opacity of this down. And let's see, maybe about 27%. 28, 29, something like that. I'm going to use my eraser here. I'm going to pull this shadow or this highlight back just a little bit. I think it's a little bit too big coming down. So we'll pull that back out just a little bit. And then maybe even come in here and do a couple of oval highlights here as well. Then the last thing I want to do is just add in a little bit more details to the inks layer. So we're going to go back to black, and I'm going to choose my smooth inker, and I'm going to turn streamline off. Sometimes I'll do this when I'm doing the ink, sometimes I'll do it after. And I just like to add in, making my brush here a little bit bigger, just like to add in some dots for texture. It just gives, I don't know, a little bit more to look at, I guess. And just pressing down different pressures to get different sizes of these dots. Once again, zooming in is really going to help you make sure that these turn out nice. If you're zoomed too far out, you're going to get a little bit of a shakiness to some of those dots. That's why I zoom back in a little bit further to fix those. Maybe a couple more down here at the bottom. All right. Looks good. And then finally, I'm just going to go ahead and make a new layer here and get this guy signed, and we will be done with today's video. All right. And there we go, a cute little narwhal for the letter N, moving swiftly through this reboot of the animal alphabet. So thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. If you like today's video too, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Feel free to share it with somebody that might find some of this information useful. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to the channel and you hit that bell icon for notifications so you can get alerted when I post new videos. We've got O coming up next. Definitely leave a comment down below in the comment section too. We've got O through Z left, so if you've got any suggestions of what you would like to see for some of those animals, definitely let me know. And if you follow along with any of these tutorials, definitely feel free to post your work online. If you're on Instagram, Twitter, X, any threads, any of the socials, tag me at BJ Dell. I love to see what you guys come up with, and it's really, really cool to see. So thanks so much for following along. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, keep creating.